Dynasty Nerds on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back in. It's Dynasty Nerds. It is the Better Sports Network, and it's Thursday night, which means you get me for the next 2 hours in your airwaves talking about Dynasty fantasy football. It is good to be back. I was gone last week. I missed you guys. I missed talking to you all, but I am back. I am refreshed. I am ready to go, and we have a really good show planned for tonight. If you have been watching since the early days, you know about my boy Gator, Fantasy J on Twitter. He is coming back for a guest appearance tonight, and we're going to be talking bold prediction. Eddie, what's up, man? Good to see you tonight. Yeah, we're going to be talking some good, bold predictions for the 2023 season. We know it's early, but it's always good to get percolating, get thinking about what could be if all the things fall right next year. So that is one of the guests. And then, of course, Dennis Bennett, as always. He will be on at 10:15. Sedated Forks saying that Dennis and Peter held it down for me, which I do appreciate. Those guys are fantastic. Love getting to talk to them whenever I can. They are obviously Dennis is every week, and Peter we see probably around once a month or so. So really glad to hear. Even Heavy T, the producer behind the screen, saying that they did an amazing job last week. So I am stoked to hear that. I am glad that everything went smooth. We had no big technical issues. You know how this show goes. There always seems to be some sort of big technical issue that goes wrong at some point. But it sounds like last week went good. This week's going to be more of the same. It is going to be a fantastic show. Cannot wait to talk to Gator. Cannot wait to talk to Dennis. And cannot wait to talk to you guys. That's right. Talk to you guys about your trades, about anything that you are interested in the fantasy space. In fact, we did that a little bit on the show. Sedated Fork, I think we answered one of his questions on the Dynasty Nerds podcast last night. So a fantastic time there. But can I be honest with you guys for a second? I gotta be fully transparent, fully honest. I am struggling a little bit. And here's the reason that I'm struggling a little bit. It's because we are in the dog days of summer. Heavy T and I were talking about this a little bit before the show started, that this time of year is tough sports-wise. I mean, the NHL finished up, NBA's finished up. Football, which is what I care about the most, this is probably the most dead time of year for football overall. Now, we do have some interesting storylines out there. There's some big free agent names, which Dennis and I are actually going to talk about a little bit tonight as well. Some big free agent names that are still out there. So we're kind of monitoring the Dalvin Cook situation. We're monitoring the DeAndre Hopkins situation. So those add like a little bit of intrigue, but the draft's over. We're not that close to preseason yet. There's not a ton of news kind of coming out. Most teams and players and everybody, they're just kind of settled in their role. They're comfortable where they're at the moment. And so there's not a lot of things coming out. So that's what makes this difficult. Now, I do like baseball. I do enjoy my Guardians. I do enjoy playing MLB The Show and getting into all that. So I do enjoy that. But man, football season cannot come soon enough. Eddie asks, how do we feel about Bryce Young this year? Eddie, we are going to be bringing on Gator in literally less than a minute. Actually, Heavy T, you can bring him on anytime you want now. We're going to be bringing him on less than a minute, and there he is right now. So right after this segment with Gator, we will talk about Bryce Young and any other trade questions you have. But we got to get to my boy Gator right now. Gator, how you doing, man?
I am good, brother. Man, it has been a minute. Last time I talked to you, you were sitting down in Orlando soaking up the rays. Now you're back up there. Now you're back up in Ohio and crying about, 84 days until we have football. It's only 80. It's happy Patterson Day to everybody. 84 days until. So, hey. No, I'm good, man. I'm glad everybody's doing good. It's been a minute since you and I have talked. Been a minute since I've been on Better Sports with you guys, so I am happy to be here.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you back because early on we low key basically had a Gator segment in the show.
Yeah, we
It
did.
was the unofficial official thing of every show, and I've had people ask me before. They said, "Hey, where's Gator been?" And I was like, "Look, since the beginning of the show, Gator's got a lot of new things in the works for him. So he doesn't get to just sit back and enjoy shows like he used to. He's involved in a lot of them now." So real quick, before we get into our bold predictions, tell everybody kind of what you've been up to, what you've been doing.
Man, it has been a whirlwind. It was a year ago or so. Is right about this time I got into podcasting and everything with fantasy intervention. Hit that hard and heavy, and started hosting with Chase and all that. And man, it's been super fun. I've still doing all that, going for Tube Network. Now I'm also doing stuff with Fantasy and Frames, doing a lot of back end stuff. I've started doing my own show with them, doing Mocking After Dark, with the Scott Fishbowl stuff and the Warrior Bowl going on or fixing to start. I got my SF13 or SFB13 gear. Not wearing it tonight, but I have 2 shirts. I still got to get my actual division shirt, which is crazy. I will be live drafting in Orlando this year for the first time. It's going to be a blast. But doing a lot of stuff on the back end with Fantasy and Frames, setting up shows, doing, man, I have learned so much. And, for the people out there that think that, it's easy work, it's fun, absolutely is fun. But there is nothing easy about any of it. There is nothing easy about any of it. And then you sit there and look at what you guys do with the nerds, and it's like, I can't even fathom the amount of work that I'm doing now and what you guys do. So, but it has been fun. Absolutely a blast doing it. So
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, yeah, are you ready to get into some of these bold predictions for 2023?
Yeah, you messaged me about doing this, and I was like, hey, let's absolutely do that. And I was like, what are we going to talk about? And you're like, bold predictions. I'm like, well, shit, I only got one.
You only have one bold prediction?
Yeah, Arizona's going to be bad.
Gator, I hate to break it to you, but I don't think that's very bold.
Oh, well then, okay, I came to the wrong show then. I'm sorry.
I think it's a good prediction. I think it's a very good prediction because I think you're absolutely right. I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to be an absolute mess. Like they are with Kyler Murray being out, change of head coaches, like there's just not really a lot there. So I would think it would be bold to say that they're not one of the 3 worst teams in the NFL next year.
No, don't steal my thunder because that is probably my number one bold take. Kyler Murray does not play at all in 2023.
Okay, now that's a little more bold. Tell us why you think that.
ACL in December. It takes a while to come back from that, number one. He says he doesn't want to play again until he's 100%.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help the Arizona Cardinals to just play him. With the class that's coming in, especially at quarterback, and the 2024 class that's coming in, it looks like studs left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they give up 2 shots? They got 2 to get that number 1 overall pick. Kyler Murray coming back and playing 1 or 2 games and winning both of those games could ruin that first overall pick and move it to a 3, move it to a 4 real quick.
Yeah.
So I don't think he plays at all this year.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. I don't think he's going to either. It'll be interesting to see, because you're correct in saying that if the Cardinals have the number 1 overall pick, whether that's via trade or they earned it just by being the worst team or whatever, if they have the number 1 overall pick, you got to go Caleb Williams. You've got to, or Drake May if he really elevates himself. But you can't pass up on that. And the Arizona Cardinals have a history of being willing to trade, a high draft pick quarterback if things aren't working out. Now, the tricky part is going to be that contract for Kyler isn't super friendly. So they're going to be eating a lot of money if they're going to deal him somewhere. Sure. But that's what can make that appealing for another team if, the Cardinals are willing and able to eat a lot of money, which you don't expect them to be competitive for a few years after taking the number 1 overall pick. So I think you're correct. I think that there's a real chance that he doesn't play at all this next year. So I'm with you on that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they extended him. And when they extended him, he is still this year at least, and maybe this year and next year on his rookie deal.
I'd have to go back and look at exactly how they structured that. But you're right. There was something a little bit different on how they went about it.
Well, I mean, the one thing that was completely different is he had to study for 4 hours a week. But
right.
that was other stuff. But no, I think it's either after this year or after next year is when his rookie deal runs out, and that's when the money kicks in. Right.
You're right. I think you're correct on that. I think you're correct. Better Boss saying hi to you over here. He's got a bunch of Gator emojis saying that the only Cardinal that he wants is Trey McBride. So he's in on McBride this year. I'm still in on Marquise Brown. I like Marquise a little bit. And then Jorge Edwards saying what's up. Your boy over at Fantasy and Frames.
Yes, sir.
So
yeah, I'm in on McBride, and I'm also in on Brown as well, especially in a dynasty.
Yeah,
because the value of it is falling for them because of the quarterback situation, right? So you can get those guys later and let them sit on your bench, but you're going to have value coming back to you.
Right. All right, you ready for my first bold prediction?
Let's hear it, baby.
All right. Justin Fields is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football next season. What do you think?
I disagree, but I can see where you're coming.
It's got to be bold. I can't just take a vanilla take. It's got to be bold.
No, I don't disagree with that, because I thought about taking Trevor Lawrence, but I was like, how do you take number 6 and move him to number 1? And how does that bold, right? So no, I see what you're saying there, though. The rushing upside with him is astronomical.
Right.
They've done a ton on that offensive line in order to, and of course, then bringing in, the classic wide receiver too, to give him another weapon to throw to in DJ Moore. But if he can, if they will allow him to throw the ball more, or at least, give him the opportunity to throw more with the offensive line that they built, that rushing game that's with him, I think absolutely he could absolutely be the number 1 in fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, I will get to that question right after the Gator segment. That's when I'll do all the trades. So if you hang out till about 9:50, 9:45 or so, I'll make sure to get to that trade question. But my rationale is, you look at, obviously the beginning part of the season was atrocious for the entire Bears offense. They refused to throw the ball. The offense looked way out of sync. But after those first 4 games, Justin Fields only had 1 game after that point under 17 points. That's nuts at the quarterback position. Absolutely nuts. So if he can maintain something pretty close to that, but then he adds in the passing game stuff, because they added DJ Moore this year. They improved a little bit on some other pieces of the offense. And every time, I swear, it's not 100%. But it's pretty darn close to 100% of the time, when you have a quarterback, an offensive coordinator, and a head coach that are all exactly the same going into their second season together, it's almost always better than the first year. Almost always better. So when you have that continuity, you have that entire offseason, you have all of that time together, you usually see a really good bump in that offense. That was one of the reasons I was so in on Hurts last year, because it was his second year in that offense with the same offensive coordinator, with the same head coach, and he got a premier weapon that they added in the offseason. That's exactly what happened in Chicago this year. I think we could see a similar jump fantasy football wise for Justin Fields.
Yeah, I love your rationale there. In the other thing of that, though, is that rushing game, I don't think it took a hit when they lost David Montgomery, right?
I don't think so either.
So that is going to do nothing but help, because now I think Khalil Herbert, who is probably the better pass pro, blocking and that sort of thing, is going to be there also to help. more on the field. I mean, in
Mhm.
order to help Fields through the passing game.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I love that. I love that actually. Now that okay, let me take back the
Am I
first.
talking you into it?
Yeah, let me just take back the first comment. I don't hate it as much as I used to 2 seconds ago.
Coming around. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, Gator, you got any other bold predictions for us?
I mean, I don't know how bold this is after what they did last year. But Detroit wins the NFC North.
Nice.
Not only host, but wins a playoff game.
Ooh.
They haven't won the NFC North in their history. The last time they won division title was 1993. Back then, it was called the NFC Central. It
Wow,
was
that's
the Bears,
right.
the Vikings, the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, and guess who else was in that division? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
So weird.
Right? Thanks to realignment, we got that all figured out. This year they play the NFC South, which is okay. Throw it up in the air. Who's going to do anything in that division right now? Offenses are questionable. Defenses are decent, but whatever. Detroit has a ton of weapons.
They
And then
do.
week 6 or week 7, they add a weapon. It's like getting a free agent after,
Yeah.
Williams. So he's got take off all of last year, his rookie year, shows up for whatever 3 or 4 games. Then he gets another 6 weeks to recoup, go out there and practice a little bit more. But yet Jared Goff is continuing to evolve.
Yeah.
As a player. He's got Dan Campbell, who's also continuing to evolve. And they did a ton of work to that defense. I just don't see, after last year, they were 1-6 at the start. Basically, November 1st to the end of the year, they were 8-2.
Mm-hmm.
They started the gel. If there is any one team, I mean, outside of the Cincinnati's, the KCs, the Eagles, the Buffaloes, if there's any one team that I'm sitting there going, I need multiple pieces of for my fantasy team, it's Detroit. I want a Jared Goff with a pass catcher. I want a Jared Goff even with Laporta.
Yeah.
If I'm playing in IDP leagues, I definitely want some of that defense. Chauncey Gardner in the back. Give me. What's the rookie from last year from Michigan? Can't think of his name now.
Aiden Hutchinson.
If I'm playing it, they've done nothing but good things. Yeah, we all questioned what they did in the first 2 picks of their draft this year.
Sure.
But then you look at what they did in the second round, third round. It's like, okay. To me, it made a ton of sense after the whole thing was done.
Sure.
Yes, it was reaches.
Probably.
They weren't getting back. I mean, it's like, just like when we talk about drafting in fantasy. Yeah, we reach in fantasy because we know that player is not going to get back to us.
Right.
Gibbs, they probably could have got him at 12.
I think so.
Or what was it? I'm sorry.
Well, they took him at
12. They probably could have got him in that that second pick that they had in the first round.
Right.
But it was just like they wanted that player. Go get your guy.
Yeah, and there were rumors that the Patriots were looking to maybe take him, so they wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. So, I think that's a good prediction, and I think the bold part isn't necessarily as much winning the division, because I'm with you. I think that division's weak, prime for the taking, but the playoff win, that would be huge for a franchise that's very similar in its long-term struggles, the Cleveland Browns. I remember just the euphoria around when the Browns beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, who constantly beat up the Browns every year. And it was like the best moment ever for Baker Mayfield. And then it was fortunately all kind of downhill from there. But like that moment as a Browns fan was so great. That would be huge for the city of Detroit, who's had nothing but losers in recent memory.
Here's
the
the
Pistons, the Tigers, all of them.
Here's the difference between what happened with Cleveland and what will happen with Detroit this year. It won't just be a playoff win, because remember, I said they're going to win the division. We all think they're going to win the division. They will win it at home.
Yeah, that's true. That would be big.
Cleveland had to go to Pittsburgh and win that game.
That's true.
Which I will talk about that later because I have that as another bold prediction because that was back
Ooh.
in 2020, if you remember correctly.
Oh, I do remember that. All right.
Teaser.
My next bold prediction, and this one's real spicy. Like if you thought the last one was spicy, this one's very spicy. You ready for this?
Let me sit down.
All right. Oh, here we go. Heavy T's got one. The producer. He said, I have a bold prediction. Desmond Ridder finishes as a top 15 quarterback in fantasy. I kind of like that. That's bold, but the rushing upside with all those weapons, it could happen.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Heavy T, man, this is our time. Get off our airways right now. Listen, I'm a producer too. I don't get to do that. You shouldn't be allowed to do that either. But I like it. I like it a lot.
Yep, it's a good one. It's a good one. All right. Ready for this? I'm
ready.
you the number one scoring quarterback. Let me give you the number one scoring running back for 2023. And it's none other than Mr. Nicholas Chubb.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay.
Nick Chubb. Now, spicy take. This is very bold, and I understand that. Here's my reasoning behind this. One, we don't have Kareem Hunt this year.
Mm-hmm.
That was somebody that they were always taking Nick Chubb off the field on third down. Now, could Jerome Ford still step in and do some of those things? Sure, but I don't think he nearly has the trust that they had in Kareem Hunt going out there on third downs. And there were also times that Kareem Hunt would take entire drives away from Nick Chubb. I don't think that's happening. I think Nick Chubb is going to get a huge workload this year, the largest workload that he has had to date. And I think he's going to be more involved in the passing game. He's been somebody that has been a top running back each and every year. In fact, last season, he was running back 6. I think people always forget how consistently good he is, but he's always in that 6 to 10 range at running back every single year. But he's always had that nagging player behind him. The other thing that I'm gonna say about this is they've talked about how the offense has evolved with Deshaun Watson this offseason. And one of the biggest struggles, presumably, for a running back is those heavy boxes because they were always running, 2 tight end sets. So you have more often 7, 8 guys in the box. So he's having to go through so much more traffic than normal. Whereas I think things are going to be a lot more spread out now. And you get Nick Chubb one-on-one with any player, I'm taking Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's winning that more often than not. So I think we're going to see better efficiency, but we're also going to see a higher workload out of Nick Chubb this coming season. And I think those two things together could put him over the top.
Yeah, my only concern with Nick Chubb is, like you said a second ago, he's always that 6 to 10 guy.
Yeah.
Right? If Deshaun Watson returns to form, you've got Amari Cooper, you've got, Landry, they've got pass, Njoku, he's got weapons out there to pass to. That would be my only concern with him, elevating himself to that RB1 position.
Yeah.
But I mean, like as soon as you said it, it's definitely bold because I mean, you're looking at, he's got to take over CMC, who's in a great offense. He's got to take over Barkley, who's, for all intents and purposes, maybe a little bit better offense than they had last year.
Right.
You're looking at, you look at DeAndre Swift. Okay, injuries, whatever, but he's in a better offense than he was, offensive line, everything, even though that, and that's a run first offense. I love the Nick Chubb take. I love it. I think that one right there, better boss, go clip that, put that on a short and put it out tomorrow and then turn around in 6 months and put it back out again and go, see, Garrett was right.
Look at that. That would be great. Andrea, it's good to see you. Mr. Scampers, good to see you. Richie, we are going to get to all of those questions right around 9:45, the second segment of the show. I'll get to all those trade questions, buy questions, all that kind of stuff right around 9:45. All right, Gator, you got another one for me?
Yeah, I got one. I've got a couple in here. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to bring up. Looking at time, I'm going to go ahead and do it. We talked about a minute ago. We talked about your Cleveland Browns in 2020. Going to the divisional round and beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. My take is Baker Mayfield takes the Buccaneers to the playoffs.
Woo! Now that is a bold take right there. Wow. All right, lay it on me because I can understand where the division's at right now. I could see how that would be a possibility.
Yep. And when you look at it, the players surrounding him, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, you've got the offensive line that's come back to, together. You got a solid defense. You got weapons everywhere. But the problem with most teams that have weapons is they're not gelled. This team has been together for a minute. They've won games. They've not only won games, they've won rings, or at least a ring.
Yeah.
They had one of the best in the game, if not the best, quarterbacking the last 2 years, 3 years with Tom Brady. So they better have learned something.
Right.
And if they can pass any of that on, all he's got to do is just be serviceable. We've seen it with other quarterbacks that we, are like, well, he's a serviceable quarterback, especially, when it comes to NFL. Maybe not in fantasy, but when it comes to NFL.
Yeah.
So the last time he took the team to a playoffs was 2020, and his top 2 wide receivers were Odell Beckham, probably still in his prime,
sure,
and Jarvis Landry.
Yeah.
Would you take Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry over Chris Godwin and Mike Evans?
No, I would take Godwin and Evans.
Then there is the whole thing for me is he's got a better core around him.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't disagree with that. And you look at the state of the NFC South right now. The Carolina Panthers are, it's their first year with Bryce Young. Like, there's not a lot to get excited about there. The Falcons, I love the pieces.
You're not excited about Adam Thielen and
Terrace Marshall?
What? I thought it was Terrace Marshall season again.
It should have never been Terrace Marshall season. I've never understood that. But so you look at then the Falcons, who are putting together a nice team.
Yes,
they are, but they're not ready yet to be a legitimate playoff threat. So really the only team they're competing with, it's the Saints. Can they beat the Saints or not? Like, because I don't think the other 2 teams are really a threat. So I think that's going to be the play.
Well, and here's the issue that I see with the Saints. Defensive coordinator is no longer there. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry. The offensive coordinator is no longer there. He's now in Atlanta. Like we talked about a little bit ago, it usually takes a full year. Even with good weapons, it does take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
You've got a rookie running back. Not saying that he's a normal rookie running back because, well, I mean, hell, we could see the reemergence of Saquon Barkley in Atlanta.
Sure.
A rookie year. So if it's going to be, I don't think this, Jorge puts in there New Orleans versus Tampa for the title or for the division. I think it's Tampa in Atlanta.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I give Atlanta a lot more credit.
So you don't like Derek Carr and what they got going there?
No, I do, but I just think what Atlanta did in free agency, they spent a ton of money and went and built up some of that defense, some of that lacking defense. So I think what they did defensively is going to help what Atlanta wants to do. They're a run for their head coach is a run first head coach. That may be some of the problem I see with Pitts in London and going back to what Heavy T said a minute ago about, Ritter being a top 15. I like it. It's spicy. I just don't know if it's going to happen because of the head coach being a run first head coach.
Yeah. All right. No, I get it. I can totally see it. All right. My next bold prediction for the 2023 season. This one, I don't know it's quite as bold as Nick Chubb, but it's pretty bold. You ready?
I'm still sitting down. I
know. I feel like you might need a glass of milk to, cool your mouth off from all this heat.
Yeah, but the spiciness of Nick Chubb was burning. Yeah,
it was pretty spicy. This was pretty close. I'm not going with the number 1 overall player at the position, but I'm saying top 5 for fantasy. All right. Top 5 fantasy season for Daniel Jones.
Oh,
Daniel Jones last year. Now, I know the name is like, ew, gross. Like Daniel Jones. I don't want Daniel Jones. He quietly was quarterback 9 last year. And that was even with missing a game. He actually, on a points per game basis, would have been ahead of Trevor Lawrence and Kirk Cousins. That would have put him at quarterback 7. And he was only a fraction of a point away from Geno Smith, who was quarterback 5. Now, Justin Fields also missed a game, but at points per game basis, he was 20 and a half. So he was a little bit ahead of Daniel Jones at 18.4. But once again, I just talked about it. Second year, same quarterback, same offensive coordinator, same head coach. I believe in Brian Daboll. I believe in what they're doing. And they have the best receiving option that they've had in a long time for Daniel Jones and Darren Waller. I think that has been one of the more underrated signings or not signing, it was a trade, but one of the more underrated trades and what that is going to mean for an offense this offseason. So I think Daniel Jones bumps up a few spots, even though I think a lot of people have him going the other direction. I have him bumping up a few spots and sneaking in the top 5 for 2023.
I mean, I absolutely love that because I have so many Daniel Jones shares. Please do that.
Please be right.
And here's the thing is, and I'm getting him, in like the 10th round of best ball. I'm getting, I'm doing some mocks with SFP, and I'm getting him in, the 3rd round, the 4th round, where I'm picking at number 4. So I'm getting that, elite quarterback up front, but then I've got to find somebody and if he can be a top 5, and now I have 2 top 5s, give me that. Absolutely. I love it. I think what they've done, what Daboll's done, building the offense, adding Waller, adding Hyatt, field stretcher, cool. But then Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be back after the injury. So I love what you're keep. Hey, come on. Give me more. Give me some more. Let's go.
All right. Let's do one more each, Gator. One more each.
Aaron Rodgers and the Jets go all the way to the AFC title game.
Woo! I would love that because I have a lot of Rodgers and a lot of Garrett Wilson. So if they're performing at that kind of level this season, give me that all day. What makes you think that they are ready to make that jump?
Daniel Hackett, or whatever his name is.
Nathaniel Hackett.
Nathaniel Hackett. There it is. Nathaniel Hackett got fired last year because he couldn't get Rodgers to come to Denver.
Right.
He goes to New York because New York says, okay, we'll pay off. We'll do it. Brady and Stafford both changed teams, and in the first year or 2, they had to go get fitted for new rings. Ultimately, that's the gist of my argument.
Well, honestly, Gator, that's what the Jets are planning. Yep. Like, there's no reason to bring in an Aaron Rodgers type of player unless you actually think that you have a shot to be a Super Bowl team. Because one, there's a media circus that surrounds him that you don't really want to deal with a younger team. 2, you're having 2, maybe at best 3 years that you're getting out of Aaron Rodgers at this point. So it's not like it's a long-term developmental play. This is we're bringing him in because we think our defense is ready. We think our young weapons on our offense are ready. And we think that we can be that team. So while it is bold, I totally understand and could see that happening for the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, again, you say, the younger team, which the Jets do have some younger pieces, but then they brought in the Randall Cobb. They brought in the Alan Lazard to be that, kind of a buffer.
Yeah.
From a brash old man, talking to his kids or grandkids. Now you've got the mom and dad right in the middle with, with Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb there being like, okay, Grandpa, you're being a little too hard. It's calm down, grandson. It's okay. I love what they did. I don't like it because I hate the Jets that just have personal feelings against the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
But I just truly think that is such a good fit. And I like what Jorge put up there, top 4 wide receiver for Garrett Wilson. # Rodgers factor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the last time, and you may have to go back into the 90s again, that you had an Aaron Rodgers or a 90s, 2000s where you had Aaron Rodgers with a top 4 wide receiver and a top 5, top 10 running back at the position. And it's very, very possible with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both those players. I guess it would all depend on how you felt about Aaron Jones while Aaron Rodgers was there. But I get your point. I mean, both young studs, and then on the defensive side to have a guy like Sauce Gardner locking down teams' top receivers.
Mhm.
There's a chance there. There's an absolute chance. All right, my last bold prediction here, and I'm not sure what level of boldness this is. I definitely don't think it's the boldest one, but it's a name that I don't think I'm hearing quite enough. But Alec Pierce from the Indianapolis Colts becomes a legitimate fantasy asset. Now, I'm not ready to say that he's going to be like a legitimate wide receiver too, but I think his game, more so than anybody in that offense, is perfect for what Anthony Richardson does. He is a guy with an absolute cannon that is looking to sling it down the field. Because if you watch him, as good as he is running the football, and he's fantastic, he is a guy that is looking to throw the ball first. It is not like some other running quarterbacks that we've seen where they're constantly looking to run and then throw if they have to. He is looking to throw the ball first. And I think, obviously, Michael Pittman's going to get his, but Alec Pierce showed that he has a propensity to make some big plays. He had a 16-point game, a 14-point game, and another 18-point game. So he had some games where he had that big play downfield. And I think we're going to see more of that. Like I said, I'm not quite ready to say like wide receiver 2 range. I think that's a little too bold for me, but I think he is a legitimate asset that you can feel comfortable starting at different times during the fantasy football season.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to figure out how I could turn this bold prediction into a homer take for me with Anthony Richardson, and I just wasn't willing to actually do it. I just wasn't going to do it. But I do love Alec Pierce. The Josh Downs, I think, is going to be a factor.
Sure.
Underneath stuff, which I
Absolutely.
think is actually going to help Alec Pierce out of the on the outside there, where he's going to be able to stretch the field a little bit more.
Yep.
And everybody talks about Anthony Richardson passing. Listen, as a Gator fan, I know his passing wasn't the crisp, but we had some sorry receivers too, so it wasn't all Anthony Richardson's fault.
Right.
But I did see a lot of progress. Just looking at film from what he was on, at Florida last year compared to what he did at the combine, compared to what I've seen just through some OTA stuff. That footwork is a lot better, and that footwork is what leads to your accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
As stupid as it sounds, I mean, your toes lead to your hands.
Yep.
Whatever reason when it comes to footballs. But he's got better footwork. I think working with is it Steichen?
Yep.
As the head coach there, with what he did with Jalen Hurts. Yes, there's going to be a lot of designed runs, but he's also got Taylor back there. So I do think that Alec Pierce is going to be fantasy viable. I actually like Alec Pierce better than I think you do. I actually have him as a mid to high end wide receiver too.
Woo! So you're even more bold on him than I am.
Yeah, I think he could actually be like that 14, 15, 16 range.
That would be a big year out of him. Big year. Jorge says that Garrett Wilson is going to be a top 4 receiver this season. I have him there for Dynasty. I would love to see him there right away this season. That would make my year. Absolutely, for sure. Well, Gator, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for spending some time with me here on the Better Sports Network. Before we get out of here, remind everyone where they can find you, what you're up to, anything else you want to plug.
Man, you can find me right over there on that Bluebird app at Fantasy J77. I'm doing a lot of mocking right now with Scott Fishbowl, with the Warrior Bowl, doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. But you can always find me right there on Twitter at Fantasy J77. Please check me out.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on. We'll definitely have you again. We'll try to get you on again before the season starts.
Absolutely, Garrett. You know where you know how to find me.
I do. I've got several points of contact. I'll find you somewhere.
Email, text, phone, it's all there.
It's all there. Thanks again, buddy.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, there have already been quite a few questions as far as trades, buys, different things like that. I'm going to try to get to all of them, but make sure to get those in. That's going to be the time to do it. And then around 10:15, Mr. Dennis Bennett is going to be joining us. Stay tuned.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers? In favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well. Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback, and so that's going to change your strategy a little bit if you have only 2 wide receivers or if you're drafting 3 wide receivers. And of course, the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments. And so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Ecklers, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're drafting, you're in the middle of a draft, and you just notice that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player. Because typically this player isn't going to drop. The average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy isn't my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
Welcome back in, Dynasty Nerds, Better Sports Network. Thank you once again to Jay, Fantasy Jay on Twitter, at Fantasy J77, I believe, on Twitter, for joining me. Gator, one of the nicest guys you would ever want to meet. So thank you so much for coming on, talking some bold predictions. And feel free, if you guys have some bold predictions of your own, put them in the chat here. We can discuss those as well. All right, let me get to some of these questions that you guys have been asking. But before I do, let me remind you about the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide. The Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available. Purchase for $26.99 or get it for free with a monthly or annual all-pro subscription to Fantasy Alarm. Start your 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm All-Pro and get immediate free access to the draft guide. That is fantasyalarm.com. All right. Let's get into some of these questions here. James Martin says, would y'all trade Devontae Smith for CJ Stroud? PPR Superflex rebuild. Now this is difficult because I really, really like Devontae Smith. But if I am in a rebuild and I am in Superflex, chances are it's looking like you probably don't have the quarterback position set. I would rather have CJ Stroud. And it's tough because we know what we're getting out of Devontae Smith. But the quarterback position, if it hits, you're going to be able to get Devontae Smith 2 to 3 times over again if CJ Stroud does hit. And I believe he will. I think he's going to be a very good, solid quarterback. I don't know that he's ever going to be like a top 5 type of guy, but I think he's going to be consistent enough in the passing game long term to be a very fantasy relevant quarterback. Maybe even in 1 QB, but for sure in super flex leagues, he's going to be very relevant. So I would probably rather have Stroud specifically in a rebuild. If it was a contending situation and you needed wide receiver, that would be tempting for me to take Smith. But in your specific position, because I've talked about the philosophy a little bit before, but when you're drafting, you draft for value. When you trade, that's when you can work on your needs. And so in this trade, it looks like quarterback is probably a bit of a need in a rebuild. You want to have those solid young QBs. I would go with CJ Stroud. He also mentioned that he has St. Brown, T. Higgins, Waddle, and Smith currently. His quarterbacks are Tannehill, Kyler, and Russell Wilson. So we know Tannehill will be falling off. Kyler, we don't even know if we're going to get him this year. So, yes, I would go ahead and get myself a little bit of CJ Stroud. All right, Richie asks, what's your guys' opinion on James Cook, and would you buy? Ooh, so I'm torn on James Cook, if I'm being completely honest. When they drafted James Cook in the second round 2 years ago, it was not my favorite draft choice. I thought that the player didn't make a lot of sense with what they needed. I wanted them to get somebody that was more of a between the tackles grinder, somebody that could run out games, somebody that could take some pressure off Josh Allen near the goal line. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. But he is a very good pass catching back. And I do think he's going to get a good amount of run. I think Damian Harris is going to be annoying, but I think James Cook is still going to be a very viable back. So assuming it's a full point PPR, I would be willing to target him. I would be willing to buy him, but it's all at what cost? Like he would be in the same range as like a Devon A-Chain for me, where you're willing to draft and trade for A-Chain. That's roughly what I'm looking at for Cook right now. There was another question. I had missed it from earlier, so I do apologize. Eddie was in here, and he was asking, how do we feel about Bryce Young this year? This year, not great. Long term, I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. I think he's going to be a very solid quarterback, a high-producing quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. But this year specifically, I'm not completely sold that he's going to be able to do much. There's not a lot there on the offensive line. There's not a lot there in the receiving game. There's not a lot there in the backfield. There's just not – I shouldn't say there's not a lot in the backfield. Miles Sanders is a very good running back. I don't want to take anything away from him, and I think he's somebody that would be more so targeting there. So that was unfair to say that they don't have a lot there because I do like Miles Sanders. But other than that, there's really not a lot for him there. So if I'm in a redraft league, even super flex, he's not somebody that I'm looking to target. I think there's a lot of other targets that are valued similarly that I would much rather have ahead of a guy like Bryce Young. But I do think he's very accurate. I do think he's very smart. I do think he can ad lib and make some big plays. And we've seen this kid be a winner. So I do think he is going to be an asset for your fantasy football team. I think he's going to be an asset for the Carolina Panthers. And because of that, I do want to make sure that I have him. If I have him, let me rephrase that. If I have Bryce Young, I feel good about it. I think that's the best way to put it. All right. Ian says he has a 12-team PPR super flex league. Start 10. He was offered Goff for Godwin and Kmet. Is that too much for Goff? He's a contender loaded at wide receiver and has decent tight end depth. Could use a quarterback, only have Stafford. Could use a third quarterback, only has Stafford and Josh Allen currently. So for me on this one, is it a little pricey? Yes. But in a super flex league, you need to pay up to get yourself a quarterback. And there's nothing worse than not having enough quarterback to get you through a playoff run. And right now, I can't trust Stafford. Like, Goff moves into your quarterback 2 spot in that situation. So I don't think it's going to be the type of situation where it's like, oh, I need Goff as my third quarter. No, you need a second quarterback. And Goff is your third guy that you're hoping is healthy, that you're hoping does bounce back to what he was, during the Super Bowl run. But I can't count on that. I know what I'm getting out of Goff. I really like what this offense is doing. So as much as it's painful to give up a guy like Godwin and an upside tight end, I think that's a deal that I would be more than willing to make to get a player like Jared Goff. All right, Just Josh says, with Kyler out, I need a quarterback in Superflex. What are the most attainable quarterbacks and what would the cost be? So we just mentioned one, Jared Goff. I don't think in most leagues you're going to have to give up more than a really late first round pick in order to get yourself Jared Goff. But if somebody that has Jared Goff loves him, there's plenty of other players in that same range. We mentioned Aaron Rodgers. We were talking about him before. He's absolutely somebody that I'm willing to target. I know, Josh, how you feel about him. So maybe not for you, but I do think he's a good target. But then you also have the Kirk Cousins, the Derek Carrs, those guys. You can give up a late first, sometimes even just multiple seconds in super flex leagues to get those quarterbacks. But those are the quarterbacks that I think are the most attainable. They're a little bit older typically. They've been on a few different teams. So I think that's the route to go, is to get those safe-ish veterans that aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg. So that's the route that I would go right now. I would go out and get like a group in that, for maybe even potentially Geno Smith, although he feels a little more risky than the rest of the guys that we just talked about. But I think that's the route that I'm trying to go there, is I'm trying to get Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, that type of range right there. All right, James says Courtland Sutton is said to be taking the Michael Thomas role in Denver. What? Oh, I think the next question is the rest of it. I was hoping it was like, what the heck? Like, but that's not it. What would he be worth would he be worth a second in a 12-man Superflex tight end premium? I think he would. I think he would. He's somebody that I've talked about a lot this offseason. And I remember I've even, debated it with Rich and Matt on the show, where they're very heavy in Jerry Jeudy. And look, do I think it's more than likely that Jerry Jeudy is the top receiver on this team this coming year? Yeah, I think it's absolutely the most likely, but I don't think it's plain and clear and obvious that he's going to be significantly ahead of Courtland Sutton. And there's even a world where Sutton outproduces him, but their ADP right now is drastically apart. Like, we're talking 60 picks difference between Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. So I'm actually in on Courtland Sutton this year, and I do think he's worth a second, especially if it's your own and it's going to be a late second round pick. Very rarely do you hit on late second round picks. So I actually think that's a really good move. I would be more than willing to give up a late second to get Courtland Sutton. All right, so Data Fork asks, is counting on Purdy a good bet or a huge gamble? The answer to that question is yes. Both things I think could be true. That is not mutually exclusive here. I think it's a huge gamble that you're taking on Brock Purdy. You're counting on a 7th round guy that we saw for half a season. Like, that traditionally is not the route that you want to take when investing in a quarterback. But that being said, every possible thing that the San Francisco 49ers have come out and said and done point to, they do really believe in this player. They really do trust in this guy. So while it is a gamble, and it is a big gamble, I think it's a worthwhile one, because right now his ADP is even below the guys that I was just talking about. So you're giving up like a 2nd round pick to get Brock Purdy. And in a super flex league, that's nothing. Like, that's absolutely nothing. Could it blow up in your face? Sure. But the reward of what it could be far outweighs the risk of losing a second round pick. So if you can get yourself the potential starting quarterback on a team that could be one of the more exciting offenses, and obviously they have a lot of assets on their team. So he can be throwing the ball not just to the receivers and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, but an elite tight end and George Kittle. And then you also have CMC there out of the backfield. Elijah Mitchell is kind of the forgotten guy in that offense, but I'm willing to pay the price in a draft, in a startup, in a trade or whatever. I'm willing to bank on Purdy being their guy. Dollar Bill says Miles Sanders for Brandon Ayuk, PPR Dynasty League. So this is probably a needs-based situation. If you are a contender, I'm probably taking Miles Sanders because I do think that they're going to use him a lot this year. I don't think that there's really any competition for touches there. I think they're going to give him the ball and give him the ball quite a bit, and he's going to catch the ball that more than we've seen over the next, or what we've seen over the past couple of years. So I would absolutely take Miles Sanders in that situation. But if it's more of a rebuild, I think Brandon Ayuk has the longer shelf life that you can bank on. So that's more of a needs-based situation for me. So right now there's a report that Heavy T just gave to me. The Chicago Bears are unhappy with wide receiver Chase Claypool this offseason on and off the field. According to Silverman, his mentality isn't where the Bears would like it to be, especially considering he's nursing a minor injury that cost him part of minicamp. I've heard from a few people inside that building that he is not somebody who is very self-motivated, Silverman said. There's a long way to go, and Chase Claypool can still change the narrative. So really interesting, because this pick ended up being the number 1 overall pick in the second round that they gave up for Chase Claypool. So you really would want a guy that you invested that much draft capital in to be self-motivated, to be doing all of the right things. And it looks like right now, I mean, we kind of said it at the time, that seemed like a bad investment, and it's only kind of making it look even worse. So, we'll see if that has an impact on Fields or not. I know a lot of people were kind of projecting Claypool more as the third receiver behind DJ Moore, behind Mooney, and they even brought in Tyler Scott. So there was question marks about where he even fit. And maybe the answer to that question is he doesn't fit, which this could turn around and look like an awful trade for this Bears team. So we'll see what kind of impact that has overall on this squad. So let's take another quick break. We'll go for another 15 minutes or so answering some trade questions, and then we'll get our boy Dennis Bennett in here to talk about some bounce back candidates and maybe some free agents that could sour things for your favorite fantasy player. We will be back in a moment.
The Detroit Lions select Sam Laporta, tight end, Iowa.
Had to go with your boy Sam Laporta there to pair with TJ Hawkinson.
Sammy, I couldn't double down on rookie tight ends. I think that would take it. That's taking it a little too far.
This could be one of the most exciting rookie tight end classes in a while, just based on the archetypes of these guys, of the Dalton Kincaids and the Sam Laportas. Obviously, Green Bay drafted 2 themselves with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. So after Kincaid, I would say is probably the consensus with tight ends. Like, who do you like as far as the best ball, like end of best ball? Do you like Laporta, or is there anybody else you like more?
I do like Laporta. We're looking for guys that can be a top 2 target on their team. So any path, any argument you could make, right? So you can make the argument that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a top 2 target with after Stephon Diggs. You can make an argument that with Jamison Williams suspended, now Sam Laporta is just going to play straight up wide receiver. He looks like a wide receiver. Why can't he line up out wide at split end, right? It's like Marvin Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would also throw another name in the ring, and I don't mind, since we're doing this for the fans, for the kids. He's still on the board. Luke Musgrave on your Packers. They're not super loaded at wide receiver. We like the guy Reed they drafted, but you never know. So why can't Luke Musgrave be a big slot? In fact, they drafted 2 tight ends, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft is more of an inline guy. They might just go 2 tight ends right away. Tucker Kraft inline, Luke Musgrave in the slot. Why can't he be a target monster for Jordan Love? So those are the guys, those are the conditions that you need for a rookie tight end to succeed. They need to not only be the best pass catching tight end on the team, but a top 2 pass catcher on the team outright. That's how you get Kyle Pitts. Evan Ingram as a rookie was top 5 because Odell Beckham Jr. hurt his knee 4 weeks into the year. So that's the formula. We're looking for guys that can actually be a top target right away. Otherwise, we're playing the sit and wait long-term game, which is what you're doing with guys like Michael Mayer.
And welcome back in. Got a little hoedown going here. Welcome back to the Better Sports Network. I am Garret Price. We are answering some of your burning questions for Dynasty Fantasy Football. Guys that we should be trading for, guys that we should be trading away, any player that we should be looking at in this process. But before we get back to some of that, let me remind you quickly about Fantasy Alarm. That's right. The Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide is now available. You can purchase it for $26.99, which is a good option. There's tons of information in there. But let's be honest. Wouldn't you rather get it for free? You would. You would rather get it for free. You can do that if you sign up for the monthly or annual all-pro subscription to Fantasy Alarm. Start your free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm All-Pro and get immediate free access to the draft guide. Go to fantasyalarm.com. Look at that. You even get 7 free days to see if you like it. What could beat that? fantasyalarm.com. All right. I think I am completely caught up. Actually, yes, I think I'm completely caught up on all of the questions. If I missed yours, please say something. I want to try to get to everybody's before we get Dennis Bennett on here in a little over 10 minutes. But if not, I had a couple other bold predictions that I didn't get a chance to get to because Gator and I had such a good time talking because he is one of the nicest guys in the industry. But let's go with this one here. Mr. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number, I almost wanted to say number 1, but he is a top 3 receiver on the season this year. So last year he had already finished really, really high, getting 16.7 points per game. But he had a couple times where he was just kind of nicked up, banged up with injury, but he is going to start this year just in fuego. Like Jameson Williams is going to be gone. They're going to be breaking in all these new rookies. I think he will be the number 1 fantasy football wide receiver through the first 6-8 weeks. Things might start to catch up as the rookies start to get a little more acclimated. Jameson Williams, who's more or less a rookie at this point, gets more acclimated. But let's not get it twisted. Amon-Ra St. Brown, for the foreseeable future, is the number 1 option on this offense. We'll see if Jameson Williams can evolve into the guy that we think he can be. And I do. I think he could end up being a very, very good wide receiver at the NFL level. But Amon-Ra's already shown what he can do. He fits perfectly with Jared Goff. Jared Goff is not this big-armed gunslinger, kind of like we were talking about with Anthony Richardson, who's going to be looking to take these huge shots down the field. He's going to be looking more for the, close to intermediate passes. And that's where Amon-Ra thrives. He's not this burner. He's not this speedster. He's not going to make these huge over-the-top plays and Moss guys, but he is smart. He is consistent. He gets open. He runs good routes. Like all of those things that you want just a professional wide receiver to do, that's what he does. He is that type of player for the Detroit Lions. So I think that he will be a top 3 receiver this coming season. Now, I had made a bold prediction last year. A couple of the ones that I got right. One was that Amari Cooper was going to be a wide receiver 1. He did, in fact, finish the year as a wide receiver 1. He was the number 10 overall receiver last year. And another one that I got right, Ramondre Stevenson. I said that he was going to be the top running back for the Patriots, and he would finish the season as a running back 1. And sure enough, despite the slow start at 4.7 and 6.1, after that, Mr. Ramondre Stevenson took off, and he did have 2 stinkers there kind of late in the year, which hurt things, but lots of 20-point games. So we'll see. Now, Heavy T just put something in the chat here. He has a bold prediction, and he's wanting to break my heart because I just talked about how great of a season Justin Fields is going to have. And he's like, you know what? Screw you, Garrett. I'm going to go the complete opposite direction. He said Justin Fields regresses and the Bears decide to take a quarterback in the draft. What are you doing to me? Come on, Ty. Man, look, I'm by myself right now on the show, and he's trying to make me look bad. Isn't it a producer's job to make you look good? Nope. Trying to make me look bad in front of you guys. Don't listen to him. Justin Fields takes that next step, and he becomes not only the rusher that we know him to be, but the passer we want him to be as well. He didn't have those concerns in college. People were not talking about his arm in college. There was no concerns about that. He will be just fine. Just fine. All right. He said, I'm a chaotic neutral type of person. There we go. All right. Let's go back. James has a question real quick. He got an offer for Bryce Young. Okay, so it's an offer for Bryce Young, Michael Carter, and Jamison Williams for Kyler Murray and a 2024 first. He would be getting the Bryce side. So, James, if you wouldn't mind, give me a little more information on this. Where is your team? Are you a contender? Are you not a contender? Because right now I think it's a close deal, but I'm leaning toward the Kyler side. And here's why. Now, if you are a contender and you need a quarterback, I do get it. I do get it. But here's why I'm leaning the Kyler side. I think you are selling Kyler Murray at arguably the worst possible time that you could sell Kyler Murray. Normally, we're talking about a player that's been taken in the first round of startups. Now he's slipping to like the third round. He is going to be a starter somewhere, whether it's Arizona or whether it's another team. That contract ensures that he is going to be playing somewhere in the future. So I don't worry about him getting Josh Rosen where he just becomes nothing and he's not a part of any team and he's not playing. He is going to be playing. So, and then you add in that mid first, if heaven forbid that becomes closer to an early first, oh my goodness, that could be huge for your team. Now it might not, but right now we've got roughly, we've got 4 that we feel really good about. We've got Caleb Williams and Drake May. We've got Marvin Harrison Jr. And then you've got Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. We feel really good about all 4 of those players. Then there's some solid running backs in Travion Henderson, Raheem Sanders. Like there's some players here in that mid round that you could really, really like to have on your team. And then you add in who knows who's going to kind of develop in this class and be the player that comes out of nowhere. We see it every single year, players coming out of nowhere to be some of the biggest names in the draft class. That doesn't mean they're going to pan out, but we see it every single year. Joe Burrow was a good example of one that kind of just came out of nowhere and kind of became the guy. Javonte Williams came out of nowhere. So, yeah, I think looking at your team, the only running back you listed is Breece Hall, so I'm guessing you don't have a lot of depth there. Your quarterbacks are okay. The other trade, if you make that other trade, it could. He said, I'm not quite sure which direction to go with my team. Right now, if you're not sure, you don't want to be trading for win now pieces. So I would still be trying to acquire draft capital. You do have some good young receivers. So you can definitely build around that. But you're going to want to kind of wait and see what you have at quarterback. And then also you're going to want to build up that running back room before you really have a chance to be probably a legitimate contender. So, all right, with that, I'm trying to think. We don't have any others. So let me tell you my last bold prediction that I had. And I kind of want to go back to a bold prediction that I had in 2020 or not 2020, 2022, because I think that this could potentially happen. So the prediction I made in 2022 was that Travis Kelce not only finishes as the top tight end, but he's the top if you add tight ends and wide receivers combined. Now, he didn't quite get to that level. He put up 316 points at the position, which was 100 more than second place. That would have put him fifth and just barely behind Stephon Diggs for fourth. So I'm going to run it back because nobody has really established themselves in that wide receiver room. I'm still holding out hope for Sky Moore. We'll see what happens with Kadarius Toney, although I'm not sold on Toney at this point. But nothing there has screamed, success at the wide receiver position other than just random guys having good weeks. I think it is still going to be a lot of Travis Kelce. And look, he was only, what was he? He was 50 points away from Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson regresses just ever so slightly. And then we see Travis Kelce emerge ever so slightly. We could be in a very good spot. And Travis Kelce could be not only the tight end one overall, but he could be the number one overall pass catching player. I guess that's not correct because running backs catch passes too, but you guys catch my drift. He could be the number one overall guy between the wide receivers and the tight ends in 2023. So we're going to run that one back for this coming season. All right, let's take our final break of the evening. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Mr. Dennis Bennett, culture coach on Twitter, about players that could throw things off for our fantasy favorites this year, guys that are still sitting out there in free agency, and then some guys that we are looking to bounce back in 2023. We'll be back in a moment.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Your heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is
here. Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush. You were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no,
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Welcome back in. Garret Price here with our very own Dennis Bennett. Dennis, how you doing tonight, buddy? Dennis might not be able to hear me yet. It would not be the Dynasty Nerds show if we did not have some technical difficulties. So while he is figuring out his sound, I am going to talk to JJ here because he actually got a question in just as we were finishing up the trade segment. So I'm going to get him in real quick. He is a contender, 1 QB league, half PPR, tight end premium, 1 point tight end premium. So a pretty decent double what you're getting from the wide receiver position. Bijan Robinson, 224 mid to late first, and early second, or Joe Burrow, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, and David Montgomery, along with Dalton Kincaid. Woo, that is a big boy trade there. Okay. Bijan Robinson in 2 firsts, or Burrow, Wilson, Cooper, Montgomery, and Kincaid. Dennis, what are your thoughts on this deal? Because this is a big one. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. It's a 1 QB, so I'm definitely leaning the Bijan side of this. But it's Bijan Robinson, 224 mid to late firsts, or Joe Burrow, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, and Dalton Kincaid. Now, he did correct himself and say 2 seconds. I don't know which side the 2 seconds are on, so I'll let him correct it. But based on what we have here, what side do you take it?
In a 1 QB and 12 team, I feel like you got to take the Bijan Robinson
right?
in 2 firsts. Yeah. I love Joe Burrow and I love Garrett Wilson. I mean, Garrett Wilson is my wide receiver 3. So I could see taking the Burrow Wilson side if you're ready to compete. It was Dalton Kincaid. I don't think he's
tight end premium with Kincaid. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think he's going to contribute a lot this year. I think one of the things that goes unreported or untalked about right now is just how good Gabe Davis made out. I don't think Kincaid is really going to take Gabe Davis's job. But 2 firsts next year, if I don't need Burrow and Wilson, if I'm rebuilding and a couple firsts is going to put me in the position to take off next year, that Bijan pick seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Now, what if it's 2 seconds? Because I think it's the Bijan side pretty easily once I remembered it was 1 QB. But if it's Bijan and 2 seconds as opposed to 2 firsts, how much does that change things for you? Because Bijan and Wilson, even though Bijan's a little bit ahead, they're pretty close in ADP. So would that be enough to change things for you that you're not getting the 2 firsts and you're just getting 2 seconds?
So let's call Bijan and Wilson even. So that makes the trade Kincaid and Burrow, and who was the third piece on that side? 4th piece, Kincaid,
Cooper, and David Montgomery.
Amari Cooper, for 2 seconds.
Right.
That feels like a smash there. So I guess it feels in that way. If it's seconds, it's the Burrow side pretty easily.
I would agree with that. Although I still think Bijan's a little ahead of Wilson for me, but I'm with you. I think if it's the seconds,
is he a second round? Wilson in a second, or is it less than a second that Bijan is ahead?
Oh wait, so it's 2 first and 2 seconds on the Bijan side
all the way.
Wow, so you get 2 first and 2 seconds in a 1 QB. It's absolutely the Bijan side.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Dennis. Well, first of all, I heard nothing but good things from last week. So how did things go from your perspective? You and Peter locking it down.
We had a really good time, and thanks to Just Josh, who's always in the chat. We're currently in round 32 of a 37 round startup he set up. So that was my productive struggle draft that we talked about last week. I just drafted Josh Dobbs in the 37th round to back up Watson. And I'm like, at this point, might as well get. Now, I will say I've got 5 picks left, and I still have 25 people in my queue. So
as much as you don't care, you absolutely care.
Right. I got, now I'm looking at people. It's like, am I going for just youth that may have a chance? It's a productive struggle, so I don't really want points. But if I take a veteran that scores some points, maybe I can trade him. I think I've got like 5 first-round picks next year and 3 first-round picks in 25, 3 second-round picks in 24, 2 second-round picks in 25. It was, and honestly, I didn't go in thinking I was going to do productive struggle. I was at 110, and if Trevor Lawrence had fallen to me, I would have picked Lawrence and went in to win.
Sure.
But he went at 107, and I sat there at 110 and thought, do I really want to take Justin Fields? I love Justin Fields, but sometimes I'm concerned that I'm wearing my scarlet and gray glasses, and I'm such a homer, and I'm like, maybe. And so I just kind of put a couple offers out, and somebody took it. Next thing you know, I've traded back from the 110, and then I've traded back from the 203. I did take Deshaun Watson at 207. I traded up from 09 to 07 because I felt like he was the last quarterback in that tier. And he's young enough, he'll be there, and I've got him for 5 years. I feel like there's production there. So, but it's been a fun draft for me.
Well, good. Startup drafts are always a blast. And, you always look back on your team and sometimes you look at it and you're like, oh man, I really wish I would have done this, this, and this. But then every once in a while you walk away from your draft and like, dang, that team is sexy. I love what I did. Like that's always a fun feeling.
Well, I do like the team. I've got some real strong young players. I went very young. I think it was probably 10 or 12 picks in before I drafted anybody outside of their second year besides Watson.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dennis, we've got a couple different things that we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. But let's start with these free agents that are still out there. We've got a few guys that some of them hold some legitimate fantasy value. There's other ones that don't really hold much fantasy value anymore, but they're more just playing the role of the spoiler that we're really hoping they don't go to the team of the player that we have invested in. So let's talk about probably the 2 guys with the most actual fantasy production potential right now. And let's start with DeAndre Hopkins. We've heard about his trip to New England that just ended today. He had a trip to the Titans. We've kind of speculated a few other places other than those teams. What are you thinking with DeAndre Hopkins right now? Would you be happy on him on either one of those 2 teams, or are you still believing that there's legitimate hope that he goes to the Bills, the Browns, the Chiefs, somebody like that?
Well, I think Stephon Diggs is doing everything in his power to make sure that Hopkins doesn't go to Buffalo. Diggs, I think, knows he's at his peak. He is 30 years old, 29 years old. He's getting ready to start that descent from the peak, and he doesn't want to lose. He's moody. He kind of pushed his way out of Minnesota. I think Gabe Davis is set up to have a better year than last year, played through injuries. Would Hopkins be better than Davis? Yes. It would definitely screw up what's going on for Stephon Diggs. So I'm starting to think, no, he's not going to Buffalo pretty good. He could still go to Kansas City. I think they have to juggle a little bit of money around. If you put up a graph of how much money and probability to win a Super Bowl, that it starts to go down how much money you want, depending on how bad you want to win a Super Bowl.
Right.
And we saw LaShawn McCoy basically ride the bench in Kansas City to get himself a ring.
Sure.
So, Hopkins isn't at that point in his career. So he would definitely bring some value to Kansas City. He would be the number one wide receiver there.
Easily.
He's at this point, even coming off an injury, I think he's more reliable health-wise than Kadarius Toney, who scares the hell out of me. Amazing talent, but just he's the perfect draft pick for a hyper fragile draft because the dude is hyper fragile. But Tennessee and New England, at first I was like, oh, Tennessee is awful. It's a courtesy visit because Vrabel coached in Houston for 5 years when he was there. But last week with Peter, I was talking it could work. I think Tannehill with weapons has a little bit left in the tank. And between Henry, Hopkins, Okonkwo, and Burks could be protected to be productive.
Yeah.
And Vrabel finds a way to win. They're not that. If Hopkins went there, I could see them winning that division and making a run into the playoffs. I don't know how far they go. They'll be winning ugly. I could see them go 10-7, win that division, and be hell to beat in the playoffs because Vrabel isn't worried about winning by 2 touchdowns. All he wants is 1 point. I don't care how ugly it has to be. You just give me that. I'll take 1-point victories all day long. And that's just the mentality he brings. It's kind of the same way with Bill Belichick in New England. Now, he would go in, he would throw a real monkey wrench into the resurrection of Juju Smith-Schuster and Mike Gesicki, that's for sure. I think if Hopkins went to New England, the other guy that would really pay off in the receiving core would be Tyquan Thornton, because now you have a legitimate underneath threat that's going to draw targets and draw coverage away, and it's going to open up that for Tyquan Thornton's speed to work. And Mac Jones is a good quarterback. Is he great? Probably not. But he was good enough to be a first-round pick. And if we believe what we heard, good enough to be in consideration to be the 3rd overall pick. But I don't think there's anything to worry about with Bailey Zappi taking Mac Jones's job. I think if Hopkins went to New England, I could see a high-end wide receiver 2 season, 900 to 1,000 yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns. Is he going to put up the 1,500 yards? No, I don't think he is.
Yeah.
I think he's on the decline in that regard, but he never won with speed. He always wins with toughness, and he still wins with toughness. It just, will he stay healthy all 17 games? So I don't know where else he's being considered legitimately. Could he go to New York to the Giants? They need a bigger receiver, a tougher receiver, but Waller's kind of going to fill that role.
Sure.
They like Bellinger. Bellinger played great last year. Wouldn't surprise me if, despite the fact that the Giants signed, 17 5'9", 180-pound slot guys, that Darren Waller becomes the primary slot.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Let's transfer over to the running back position, because we had been talking about it for a long time, what could be with Dalvin Cook. Finally, it did take place. It looks like he's in no rush to make his decision. Miami is kind of the landing spot that's got the most buzz for Dalvin Cook, but there's plenty of other places that he could also land that could be beneficial for him, but it could also take away some touches from fantasy running backs that we like. So do you think right now Miami's the spot that Dalvin Cook ends up, or do you think that there's another team that ends up pulling the trigger with Dalvin Cook?
It's interesting that Cooper Kupp restructured his contract today and freed up $10.4 million in cap space, which was, magically, the same amount of Dalvin Cook's contract that got him cut was $10.4 million. Coincidence? Maybe. I don't think he's going to get $10.4 million. But I think, could I see him getting somewhere between what David Montgomery got, 3 years, $18 million, and Saquon Barkley's franchise tag at $10 million? Yeah, I could see him getting 2 for 16 and a half, something like that. But he would be. I think there are a lot of people that are kind of looking at the Rams and thinking they're going into a rebuild, they're going to a youth movement, but they're getting Cooper Kupp back, they're getting Matthew Stafford back. I think they're okay with their wide receivers that they have. They're going to place very specific roles other than Cooper Kupp. Kupp will get 190 targets if he stays healthy. Higbee will get a lot of targets. He'll be very – and if Dalvin Cook went there, he would supplant Cam Akers. Akers would become the number 2. And would it be good for fantasy? Not if you're an Akers manager, But if you're a Dalvin Cook manager, we've seen that Sean McVay can make a running back. I mean, for God's sake, I started Ronnie Rivers one time last year. And he got points.
He did.
It wasn't a 0.
He did.
So I think Miami makes a lot of sense, except they re-signed all their backs. And it wasn't like they just did, tender free agent deals. They paid him a little bit of money, not a lot. I mean, Cook would go to Buffalo and be the best back, kill the resurrection of Damian Harris.
Sure.
Cook would go to Miami and be the best back and kill Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, and probably Devin Achane too.
At least early on.
Yeah. And it would, because it's going to be, it's Hill and it's Waddle, and as Kirk Herbstreit used to say, AYO, all you others, So I would like Cook to go to the Rams, just because I think he's going to have a clearer, it isn't going to be as muddy. Yes, Cam Akers is there, but we've seen that McVay is like, Cam, Cam is like, he's McVay's 3 a.m. booty call. Ain't nobody else. I guess I'm rolling you out there this week.
Yeah.
That's literally what it is. And Cam was like, F it, you're paying me. I'm going to go out there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I don't think that they're in the cap position to really make this work, but I would be really interested in Dalvin Cook going to the Chargers. I think they've been looking for a between the tackles guy for a long time, and you put two guys together like Austin Eckler and Dalvin Cook, that would be a scary backfield, and that would just open up so much for Justin Herbert that I think that would be a fun situation. I just don't think that and I have to look into all the details of their cap situation, but I don't know that their cap would necessarily allow it.
Yeah, it feels like if he went to the Chargers, the biggest impact would be on Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston.
Sure.
Mike Williams is going to still get his, and it looks like Quentin Johnston is literally the heir apparent to Mike Williams, and Josh Palmer is the heir apparent to Keenan Allen. It feels like they have their replacements in-house there. If Cook went there, I still think Austin Eckler could catch 100 passes and scored, 12, 14 touchdowns. It's not going to affect. He wants somebody to run the ball so he doesn't have to get hit.
Yeah. And if I'm reading this correctly, actually the Chargers, their estimated cap space right now, it looks like is around $11 million. So they could potentially make something work there. So we will see. All right. Let's talk about some names now that maybe aren't going to be as fantasy relevant as we would like them to be, but they could just be really, really difficult for fantasy guys that we do like. Let's start with Ezekiel Elliott. Right now, it does feel like he could end up being a Dallas Cowboy once more, but there's other teams that he could potentially fall on or fall to and fit with. Is there one that you're like, please just stay away from this guy? Just leave this guy alone. I don't want you cutting into his carries. Is there somebody that you're worried about like that?
Not with Zeke, and mostly because I feel like there's a wink deal that like a week, 10 days before training camp ends, Zeke is going to land back in Dallas.
Yeah, I can see that.
They did not address the running back position to speak of. And Zeke isn't what he was, but what he still does good, he still does really good. You need a yard and a half. 9 out of 10 times he gets you that yard and a half. You need a blitz picked up, he's going to pick up that blitz. You need 9 yards on a screen pass, Zeke is going to get it. You need a 12-yard, break a tackle, get to the outside, put in Tony Pollard. But so I feel like he's going to go there and end up possibly vulturing. Like Pollard has the ability, because he's so dynamic, to be like, what was he, RB7 last year?
Yeah,
RB8?
he was a top guy.
He could be the RB1 if he gets the volume in the red zone. Zeke would kill that. I think if Zeke goes back, Pollard ends up being that back end RB1 versus a top end RB1. One place he could go, let's say he went to the Rams, he's not going to take a lot of touches. I could see it being a 65-35 split, but he kills Akers because he gets the red zone stuff. Because Zeke, well, what he's lost in athleticism, he still has vision, and that's always been Akers' Achilles heel, pun intended, is his vision. So I think Akers will still be productive, but it feels like Zeke could go there and rain on his parade and end up putting up 10 to 12 touchdowns and 600 yards. And all of a sudden, what could have been a 1,200-yard, 45-catch, 10-touchdown season for Cam Akers is 900 yards, 25 catches or 30 catches, and 5 touchdowns.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. But I think you're right. I think it's the Cowboys. I think he ends up back there. But 2 running backs that I really have no clue where they're going to end up is Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette. Neither one is like ancient, but neither one's young. Both are, I believe, 27 years old. They were drafted in the same class. So Hunt might actually be age 28. I'll look as you're answering here, but do we see either one of these players posing any sort of real fantasy threat this year, or are they strictly just going to be annoying to a player that we like?
I think they're going to strictly be annoying. So Hunt's the kind of guy that stays unsigned till training camp. Chicago goes in and realizes, hey, Roshan Johnson can't quite pick up the blitz like we thought he could. Khalil Herbert is too small. And David Montgomery really played a large role for us. Let's bring in Kareem Hunt. Mm-hmm. It feels like Hunt and Fournette are entering the Latavius Murray stage of their careers.
Yeah.
I could see, Hunt probably more so than Leonard. No, maybe Leonard going to Baltimore and throwing a monkey wrench into the gears. Gus Edwards is getting, up there too. We're primed for a J.K. Dobbins breakout. His vision was fantastic last year, the last half of the year, and you showed it. You could see the burst. He just didn't have the long speed back yet. Well, now we're a year past that. All signs point for Dobbins to be all systems go, wheels up. Fournette could go in there, and because he has a well enough rounded game, kind of just chip away at every little bit of Dobbins' game and keep him in that 900-yard range with, 30 catches instead of, 1,150 catches.
Yeah. Yeah, no, both guys I am really worried about. I really hope it's not the Baltimore Ravens. I've way too many J.K. Dobbins shares for that to happen, so that would be heartbreaking for me. But, there could even just be a situation where look, it's not sexy at all, but it would be a pain in the butt. Look at a team like Houston. Houston they've got a new head coach. They often coaches want to get their guy. Pierce is young. Singletary's, he's fine, but like I could really see that being a possibility for it, and maybe not specifically the Texans, but a team like that where it's a younger team. They just need a vet running back to kind of help get them through until they get their long-term answer. Somebody like that. So, I could see that kind of scenario playing out there. Another one I would hate to have is anybody join Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders, I want him to have all of it. Like, don't add anything to that. Let him have all the room, all the catches, all the everything. I don't want anybody messing that up. So, that's another one where I could see that being just a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I think, well, to answer your question, JJ, yes, Garrett Wilson is my dynasty wide receiver 3. And Sedated
Fork for me, so we're not far off.
Sedated Fork brings up, the potential of a Barkley holdout. It feels like as much as I want, Eric Gray to be a thing, I don't know that that's going to happen. Matt Breed is there. Gary Brightwell's there. The Giants are someplace where I could see Fournette go because he went from being, I don't know what they called him, Lenny, to Lombardi Lenny, because he's really front runner Lenny, and the Giants are on the upswing. And if he can get some money to go there and back up and be an insurance policy for Saquon Barkley, that would make sense. I think another, like Kareem Hunt, it depends on where's the matrix of I want money, I want playing time, I want to win at. I could see Kareem Hunt go to Arizona. Like, sure. They don't have a whole lot outside of Connor. Kareem Hunt would be the perfect complement to him. No, the team's not going to be good. I was listening to Gator earlier, and you guys talk. They're not going to be good.
No.
I think Hollywood Brown could catch 2,000 yards worth of passes because they're always behind. All he's got to do is stay healthy. It's going to be YOLO ball. Hollywood's down there somewhere.
Just chuck it.
But they're going to need somebody besides James Conner and Keontae Ingram. They've got another guy there that's very nondescript. I can't remember. So
is Eno Benjamin still there or no?
No, he's in New Orleans.
Okay.
So,
all right, Dennis, let's switch over from these old depressing players and talk about guys that we have some excitement for. Some guys that we think might be able to bounce back and be what they once were, or maybe even just what we hoped they would become. Who are some guys this year? We'll take your first one here. Who's a guy that you really like to bounce back for 2023?
So, I was listening to you guys earlier. I love David Montgomery this year. He signed a 3-year contract. He's behind the best offensive line that he's ever played behind. He's had career fantasy finishes of, let me see, did I scroll past it? RB22, then RB6, RB21, 20, and then last year RB21. I think he's somewhere between 10 and 14 this year.
Okay.
I get it. Gibbs is an explosive player. He's gonna catch some balls. He's gonna run the ball a little bit. But David Montgomery is an effective back, and great lateral movement, good burst, no long speed. But Dan Campbell is going to be happy taking shots with his explosive players and letting Amon-Ra St. Brown and David Montgomery grind up the field 8 to 12 yards at a time, and then just take those big splash plays with the other guys. I think Montgomery, who is RB20, RB21 last year, going at RB33 in the ADP right now. To me, that feels like a steal, especially since he signed a 3-year contract. I feel like we've got 2 years of that in good shape, and you're just going to be able to roll with that. If I got him as my RB3, oh, I love that.
No, I'm with you. You look at what Williams did last year, just getting so much goal line work, and it really seems like that's what Dan Campbell wants. He wants a guy that he can trust on the ground near the goal line, and then they're going to let Gibbs do a lot of the other stuff. But when it gets inside the 10 there, we're going to see a lot of David Montgomery. So I think that's a good call there. The first one that I had is actually a player that we talked about earlier, because one of the listeners here had a question about him, but I have Cortland Sutton identified as a guy that I think is a bounce back candidate. He's somebody that's being drafted so far down in startups. I'm talking the 120s, the 130s overall. So you're taking him at the 11th round and places like that. And look, I get it. Jerry Jeudy looks like the more explosive player. You know, he's been less injured, but the start of the season last year for Cortland Sutton looked pretty darn good. He started the year with an 11-point game, a 19-point game, a 17-point game, and a 16-point game. For as bad as the Denver Broncos started, he didn't. He was actually still performing at a very high level. But then he had some down weeks, and then he was injured and all that. But he still even finished the season strong with an 11-point and a 12-point game. I'm not convinced that he isn't going to be similar to what we saw from Michael Thomas. I'm not convinced he's not going to have a huge bounce back season this year. And under Sean Payton, it's an offensive mind that I trust a lot more. I really have there's no way Russ can be worse than he was last year. I really just don't think that's humanly possible. So everything is going to be an upswing this year. And I think Cortland Sutton's going to be a big beneficiary of that.
I love that. And I was a big Sutton fan. I'm admittedly team big wide receiver.
That's
and when
true.
I heard that earlier about Sutton in the Michael Thomas role, to quote my buddies out of Austin, Texas, Dangerous Toys, I was sporting a Woody. It was, I mean, when you look at his finishes, wide receiver 48, his second year, we were excited. He broke out wide receiver 17. Then he was injured, wide receiver 47, wide receiver 45 the last 2 years. He's going off the board right now at wide receiver 55 at, what's that pick? 147, according to the Dynasty Nerds, ADP in the 13th round. And if he hits that Michael Thomas role, oh my goodness, 150 targets, 95 catches, maybe only 1,050, 1,100 yards. I do think Sutton is more dynamic than Michael Thomas was, even prime Michael Thomas. I think Thomas may have been a little tougher at the catch point, but Sutton, he's that big guy. I'm all on board with that. I think, it's making, because I've been nervous about the Denver wide receiver situation, because I've got Russ on my list here as somebody that could bounce back. He was quarterback 16 last year, and he's going off in our ADP as quarterback 23.
Such a value.
And he's still only just 34 years old, I think.
Yeah, something like that. So, I mean, you easily have 3 or 4 more seasons at worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario. And his contract is not one that they can get out from. So Russell Wilson is locked in as their quarterback.
Maybe better than Kyler Murray's, but it's cumbersome.
Yeah.
Let's see what Russ's fantasy finishes were. Oh, where did it go? I don't see it on here. Quarterback.
We know that they were pretty darn good, though. I mean, he's had seasons where he's been the top overall quarterback.
Yeah. So the last year he was 16, QB 15. Before that, it was QB 6, QB 3, QB 9, QB 1, QB 11, QB 3, QB 3, QB 8. So he's only has 3 seasons outside the top 10. I know we like to ride that second-year coordinator, second-year quarterback, second-year coach. I think we throw it all out the window with Sean Payton.
Yeah, when things went that bad, you're good to have a second year or a new guy for the first year. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Dennis,
I
who's
think-
another guy that you got bouncing back this year?
So I think Wilson pops back up into the top 12. I think he'll finish as a QB1. Some of them are injury related. Cooper Kupp, he's going to bounce back. He finishes wide receiver 23.
I had Jonathan Taylor on my list too. It felt kind of obvious, but
yeah, it seems, Dobbins is probably, he finished as RB 57. He's going off the board at RB 16. And I feel like that's probably pretty fair value. I think he has if everything goes right, Dobbins may be an RB1. But I think the volume will cap him out a little bit. A guy that I like to return is honestly Amari Cooper. Like he was wide receiver 10 last year. He's going off the board at wide receiver 35 right now.
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to be an RB1, but I think he's top 15.
Yeah, he absolutely could be. Once again, Deshaun Watson, if he's anything like the old Deshaun Watson, that really could be the case. So he wouldn't necessarily be the true like bounce back definition since he played well, but he's definitely like crazy undervalued.
Yeah, he's going to bounce back from where he's being valued.
Exactly.
I've got one last one for you.
Okay.
It's a tight end. Now, DeAndre Hopkins could throw a monkey wrench into the whole situation.
Oh man, if you pick the same guy as me, I'm going to crack up here.
Is it Gesicki?
Oh no, it's not Gesicki. Okay.
If DeAndre doesn't go to New England, I could see Gesicki being the guy there. He's an exceptionally good pass catcher. He's 6'6", 240 pounds. He's going to provide the type of target that Juju can't. He's going to be the intermediate between Juju and Tyquan Thornton. He's a good pass catcher. Bill is not going to ask him to block. He's going to be a slot receiver or an outside receiver when Juju is in the slot. He was tight end 24 last year. He's being drafted at tight end 27. I feel like he's a tight end 10 to 14. I think that's where he ends up. I just think he's going to get enough volume that the receptions, he's going to rack up catches. He's going to convert first downs. If you're in a point per first down league, Mike Gesicki is going to be a phenomenal tight end for that.
Yeah, no, I could absolutely see that. I could see him bouncing back because his value was, almost dead, almost completely dead. And I was really hoping in free agency he would go somewhere a little more exciting. Didn't happen, but I think we could see some better things there just because there's not a lot else. Somebody's got to do it. Can he fill what used to be the Gronkowski role and really be that big playmaker at tight end? So
he's going behind backups that I don't know will ever win a job. He's going behind Jelani Woods. Let's see, almost 20 picks behind Jelani Woods. 15 picks behind Dawson Knox. We've already all retired Dawson Knox in favor of Dalton Kincaid. He's going 6 picks behind Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, that's an odd one. People love Isaiah Likely. And I get it. He's looked good, but
he's a fantastic handcuff.
Exactly. He's a tight end handcuff, which you don't see very often, but that's exactly what he is. No, I went with somebody that finished as the 31st overall tight end last year, and he's being drafted, obviously higher than that, right as a low-end tight end 1. But I think this guy bounces back in a huge way this year, and I think he could end up being a top 3 tight end this season, and that's Mr. Darren Waller. Darren Waller, New York Giants. Look, when you said DeAndre Hopkins, I was like, oh no, Dennis picked Darren Waller too. But I truly think that he is going to be an absolute target hog. I think Dable's going to dream up some awesome things for him. They traded for him for a reason. It wasn't just like a free agent signing. No, they actively sought out this player. There is nobody like him on the team that's all either deep speed threats or, underneath guys. Like the only one that even sort of plays similar is Hodgins. And who knows what could happen with Hodgins. He's completely up in there. He could be their top receiver. He could be their fifth receiver. I have no idea what that wide receiver room is, how that's going to shake out, how it's going to play out. But the one thing that I feel very, very confident in is that Darren Waller is going to get a lot of targets and he's going to do a lot with them.
Yeah, he was the second guy on my list behind Gesicki.
Okay.
So, and then the other one I had on there was Dalton Schultz. He was tight end 10 last year, but he's being drafted at tight end 17. I feel like he could be a volume hog. I don't think Schultz will lead the team in targets or catches, but Gesicki, Waller, Kyle Pitts, there's some tight ends out there that obviously Kelsey. I mean, we could have tight ends leading 4 teams in catches.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely in the realm of possibility. Well, Dennis, I think that more or less wraps up our show, unless you had another one you just wanted to spit out there real quick.
I did that with Schultz.
Schultz was your spit out guy there. The one guy that I kind of had, not at the tight end position, but at the running back position that I think could have a bounce back year is DeAndre Swift. Kind of a more of an obvious one. It's because of landing spot and situation, but I did want to make sure that I mentioned him just quickly. Hopefully the new scenery around him makes things a little bit brighter for DeAndre Swift's fantasy.
Ain't nothing like a brand new training room.
That's right. That's right. All right, Dennis. Well, remind the good folks where you're at. Tell them what you have going on. Anything you want to pump up right now.
I'm at culture_coach on Twitter, like it says on the screen. Most Tuesday nights, I'm in the Nerds Discord talking trades with Pete Bartowski. Mondays and Fridays, most of them, I'm doing the Fantasy Football Roundtable with Matt Bruning from this network, also the Campus to Canton crew. And then we're getting ready to start work on our Fantasy Forecast series where we break down the fantasy prospects of every relevant player on every team. The Arizona Cardinals one's going to be short.
How real quickly, how long have you and Bruning been doing the roundtable? Because it's been a while.
We've done somewhere close to 650 episodes.
How many years does that span?
We're over 5.
Wow. Very cool. Well, you guys know me, Garret Price. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Price. Talking all things fantasy football. This time of year, I know it's slow. I know there's not as much going on, but you can find us out there. We're always finding something to discuss, always finding something to talk about. Doing a lot more on the YouTubes lately, so you can find me on YouTube breaking down players, breaking down prospects, all kinds of good stuff, and everything for this coming season. So for Dennis, for Heavy T behind the screen, for me, Garret Price, we will see you back here next week.